On September 20th, 1944, at 7:15 in the morning, Major Charles Carpenter settled into the pilot's seat of his L-4 Grasshopper at a makeshift airstrip operated by Ford, situated near Araort, France. He observed the fog creeping across the landing strip, its density sufficient to obscure German Panther tanks that were advancing from approximately 3 miles away. Carpenter, aged 31, possessed 400 hours of flight time primarily in his capacity as an artillery spotter, but his record of destroying enemy armor stood at 0. The German forces had just initiated a counteroffensive, deploying the 5th Panzer Army, which included 47 Panther tanks and 30 armored cars. Combat Command A of the 4th Armored Division found itself pinned down. Carpenter's mission was straightforward: to survey enemy locations from the air, relay artillery targeting coordinates, and witness the combat from a detached perspective. The L-4 Grasshopper, a military adaptation of the Piper J3 Cub, featured fabric-covered wings, a maximum speed of 85 miles per hour, 2 seats, and no defensive armament or armor. German soldiers referred to these aircraft as Maytag measures due to the distinctive hum of their 40-horsepower Continental engines, reminiscent of a washing machine. American artillery spotters typically conducted 500 missions monthly over France, and German troops seldom targeted them. Engaging an unarmed observation aircraft would betray the shooter's position to every Allied artillery battery within a 10-mile radius. This unwritten protocol had generally ensured the safety of these pilots. However, Carpenter had personally witnessed the grim consequences when this understanding faltered. Just 3 weeks prior, his own 4th Armored Division had sustained the loss of 41 Sherman tanks within a 6-day period near Lunéville, resulting in the deaths of 32 crews. German Panthers could detect Shermans from 200 yards, and by the time American tank commanders identified the enemy threat, the Panthers' cannons were already in action. Their 75mm shells effortlessly pierced the frontal armor of Shermans at a range of 800 yards, leaving most crews with no chance of survival. Carpenter had flown over the smoldering wrecks daily, cataloging the fallen, relaying coordinates, and observing the plumes of smoke rising from hatches that would never open again. His radio often carried desperate pleas for artillery support that arrived too late. He could clearly identify German armor movements and track their positions, yet his role was limited to reporting, a passive observer to the demise of American soldiers. 3 months of such experiences had profoundly altered Carpenter. 2 days earlier, he had approached an ordnance technician and a crew chief at the airstrip with a question that left both men staring at him, convinced he had lost his sanity. He inquired if it would be feasible to attach M1 bazookas to his Grasshopper's wing struts and connect the firing mechanisms to his cockpit controls, thereby transforming a fabric-covered reconnaissance plane into a combat-ready asset. The technician initially reacted with laughter, which quickly subsided upon realizing Carpenter's earnestness. To witness how Major Carpenter's unsanctioned modification transformed an artillery spotter into America's sole airborne tank ace, please consider liking this video. Your engagement helps us share more compelling narratives. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. Now, returning to Carpenter. By the onset of dawn, 6 bazooka tubes protruded from his wing struts like predatory fangs, each loaded with a 2.36-inch rocket capable of penetrating 3 inches of armor plate. Carpenter had adorned the fuselage with the image of Rosie the Rocketer in white lettering. The fog was beginning to dissipate, and through the thinning haze, Carpenter could discern the movement of vehicles advancing towards Combat Command A. They were Panther tanks, and he had 6 rockets ready to engage them. The genesis of this audacious idea occurred 3 weeks earlier during the siege of Lunéville. While conducting reconnaissance over German positions, he had observed a convoy of Wehrmacht trucks transporting supplies to the front lines. Recognizing them as an ideal artillery target, Carpenter relayed the coordinates. However, By the time American artillery acquired the correct range, the trucks had already vanished into the dense forest. He had watched the shells land harmlessly on an empty stretch of road. Later that evening, in the officer's tent, Carpenter encountered two fellow L4 pilots, Lieutenant Harley Merrick and Lieutenant Roy Carson. Amidst their drinks and conversation, a daring concept emerged. What if they equipped their aircraft with offensive weaponry, not merely for defense? Carson had already experimented with this, securely fastening two M1 bazookas to his wing struts. He had successfully destroyed two German supply trucks near Metz. While this modification lacked official sanction, it had not been explicitly prohibited. General Patton's Third Army was advancing at such a rapid pace that formal authorization procedures were often bypassed. The following morning, Carpenter located an ordnance technician named Sergeant William Morrison. Morrison, a young man from Iowa with a knack for fixing anything using wire and sheer determination, collaborated with Carpenter on the modification for 2 days. The primary technical challenge involved managing the aircraft's weight limitations. The L4 Grasshopper had a maximum payload capacity of 232 pounds. Each M1 bazooka weighed 13 pounds, meaning 6 bazookas accounted for 78 pounds, in addition to the mounting hardware, electrical wiring, and firing switches. They were pushing the aircraft's structural limits even before loading the munitions. Each bazooka was deliberately angled slightly upward, 15 degrees. This adjustment was crucial, providing Carpenter with a better chance of success during shallow dives, as the rockets would arc towards their target, while Carpenter simultaneously pulled away from potential return fire. Morrison skillfully integrated the firing mechanisms into a control panel he installed just to the left of Carpenter's seat. 6 toggle switches, each corresponding to a single rocket, allowed for independent firing. Activating a switch would direct an electrical charge from the battery through copper wiring to the bazooka's igniter, igniting the rocket's propellant. This propulsion generated 2 pounds of thrust, propelling the projectile down the launch tube at 280 feet per second. The warhead was the M6 high-explosive anti-tank round, measuring 6.5 inches in length and weighing 3.4 pounds. It employed the Monroe effect, utilizing a shaped charge. Upon impact, the copper lining would collapse inward, forming a superheated jet. This jet reached temperatures of 3,000 degrees, sufficient to melt through steel as if it were butter. However, significant obstacles remained. German Panther tanks boasted frontal armor approximately 8 inches thick, a challenge the M6 rocket could barely overcome. Their side armor, though only 3 inches thick, still presented a formidable defense. The most vulnerable areas were the top of the Panther's turret and the engine deck, which were only 40 millimeters, or 1.6 inches, thick. Penetrating these sections was feasible, necessitating that Carpenter attack from above, diving towards the German tanks, firing his rockets, and then rapidly ascending to evade machine gun fire that could shred his fabric wings. Morrison had calculated that at 80 miles per hour during a dive, Carpenter would have approximately 3 seconds to acquire his target, 3 seconds to fire, and 3 seconds to pull up before crashing into the ground or flying into a hail of German bullets. The Grasshopper possessed no armor whatsoever. A single machine gun round striking the engine would inevitably lead to an uncontrolled crash. A bullet piercing the fuel tank would instantly transform the aircraft into a fireball. Morrison completed the final wiring connection and stepped back, looking at Carpenter. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Carpenter's mind replayed the image of the 32 tank crews lost at Luneville. He heard the voices on his radio, pleading for assistance that never arrived. Carpenter advanced the throttle. The Grasshopper lifted smoothly from the runway. The fog had lifted, revealing 5 Panther tanks advancing directly towards Combat Command A. It was time to test his unconventional armament. Carpenter acquired the first Panther at a distance of 1,100 yards. The tank was moving northeast along a tree line, its turret swiveling as it scanned for American positions. 4 more Panthers followed in its wake, accompanied by approximately half a dozen armored cars. The entire German column extended for roughly 800 yards. Carpenter's hands trembled. He had never before fired a weapon from an aircraft, nor had he engaged anything more formidable than a supply truck. Now, he was descending towards 5 tanks, capable of eliminating him with a single burst from their machine guns. The Grasshopper descended through 800 feet, then 700, then 600. At 500 feet, the German forces spotted him. A Panther's hull-mounted machine gun opened fire, its tracer rounds arcing upwards like malevolent fireflies. Carpenter heard the fabric of his aircraft tear and felt a shudder run through the plane. A round had struck his left wing, narrowly missing the strut. At 400 feet, the lead Panther filled his vision. Carpenter could clearly see the commander standing in the open hatch, gesticulating and shouting orders. Carpenter actuated the first toggle switch. Nothing happened. He flipped it again. Still no response. Either the electrical connection had failed, the battery was depleted, or Morrison had inadvertently crossed a wire. At 300 feet, the Panther's turret began to rotate towards him, its 75mm cannon capable of swatting him from the sky like an insignificant insect. Carpenter activated the second switch. The bazooka fired. The rocket screamed from its tube, leaving a trail of white smoke. The Grasshopper lurched sideways under the recoil. Carpenter fought to control the aircraft as he watched the rocket arc downwards. It struck the Panther's engine deck squarely in the center. The resulting explosion sent fragments of metal spinning through the air. Black smoke billowed from the tank's engine compartment. The Panther shuddered to a halt. The commander rapidly descended into the turret, and the hatches slammed shut. 1 tank was neutralized, with 5 rockets remaining. Carpenter yanked the control stick back, initiating a climb. The Grasshopper groaned under the immense G-forces. More machine gun fire followed him skyward, rounds whipping past his cockpit. 1 bullet shattered his instrument panel, sending glass and metal fragments showering into his lap. He reached 800 feet when he executed a sharp left bank. The remaining Panthers had dispersed, their commanders evidently realizing this was no ordinary observation plane. It possessed formidable offensive capabilities. Carpenter circled, searching for his next target. An armored car was rapidly accelerating towards a stone farmhouse, seeking cover. Carpenter pushed the nose down, commencing his second dive. 600 feet, 500, 400. He fired the third rocket. It was a direct hit. The armored car erupted in flames, its internal ammunition igniting and detonating in secondary explosions that tore the vehicle apart. Carpenter now faced 2 critical issues. Firstly, having fired 2 rockets, his Grasshopper was now unbalanced. The right wing was heavier than the left, causing the aircraft to attempt a starboard roll. He had to continuously counteract this instability to maintain level flight. Secondly, every German soldier on the ground was now aware of his hostile presence. A Panther's main gun fired, its shell passing so close that Carpenter felt the pressure wave, his ears ringing. The Grasshopper bucked violently, like a spooked horse. For a fleeting moment, he feared he had been hit, but the controls remained responsive, and the engine continued to run. He fired his 4th rocket at 300 feet. It missed its intended target, impacting the ground 20 yards in front of a Panther, showering the tank's side armor with dirt and shrapnel, but failing to penetrate. Carpenter had 2 rockets left, and he was running out of altitude. He pulled up, leveling off at 1,000 feet. His fuel gauge indicated half empty. He had been airborne for 20 minutes, which felt like 20 hours. Then, he observed his objective below. Combat Command A's trapped support units, consisting of water trucks and supply vehicles. Approximately 40 men were pinned down behind a low ridge, with German Panthers advancing on their position. In 5 minutes, those men would either be dead or captured. Carpenter turned south, pushing the throttle to its maximum setting. The The Grasshopper screamed back towards the airstrip at 90 miles per hour. He needed additional rockets and was determined to undertake a second sortie. Carpenter executed a hard landing at the forward airstrip. The Grasshopper bounced twice before skidding to a halt. Morrison was already running towards him, accompanied by a crew of ordnance handlers. "How many?" "2 confirmed," Carpenter shouted over the engine noise. "Possibly 3. We need to reload immediately." Morrison's team sprang into action, their practiced routine kicking in. 6 men, 6 rockets, 2 minutes. Each bazooka had to be reloaded from the rear. One man stabilized the tube, while another slid the rocket into place and secured the electrical connection before moving to the next launcher. Carpenter kept the engine running and remained in the cockpit, acutely aware of the ticking clock. Every second was critical. Those trapped support units at Airport were still under intense pressure. After 1 minute and 40 seconds, Morrison gave a thumbs up. Carpenter released the brakes, and the Grasshopper rolled forward, lifting into the air. He was back over Airport 12 minutes after his initial engagement. The tactical situation had evolved. The immobilized Panther from his first pass was still emitting smoke, but the remaining German tanks had regrouped, forming a defensive perimeter around the pinned American support crews. German infantry had disembarked from their armored cars and were advancing through a wheat field. Carpenter approached from the east with the sun at his back. The Panthers did not detect him until he was at 600 feet. He fired 2 rockets in rapid succession. The first missed its mark, impacting the ground between 2 armored cars. The second rocket struck in Stkovzet, 251 half-track directly in the center, causing its fuel tank to explode. Burning gasoline spread across the wheat field, forcing the German infantry to scatter. The trapped American water point crews seized the opportunity, starting their trucks and breaking cover, driving rapidly towards friendly lines, while Carpenter commenced another pass. His final 2 rockets found their marks. One struck a Panther's turret ring, jamming the traverse mechanism, rendering the tank mobile but unable to aim its main gun. The other impacted an armored car, disabling it. Carpenter ascended to 1,500 feet and circled the area. The German assault had faltered. The Panthers were withdrawing towards their own lines. The American support crews had successfully escaped. Carpenter returned to the airstrip, landed, shut down the engine, and remained in the cockpit for 5 minutes, his hands still trembling uncontrollably. Morrison approached cautiously. "Are you all right?" Carpenter nodded. Reloaded. That afternoon, Carpenter undertook a third sortie, locating a German supply column near Nancy and destroying 2 more trucks. Upon his return, 15 individuals were awaiting him at the airstrip. Word had spread rapidly. Pilots, ground crews, and even a Stars and Stripes correspondent named Wes Gallagher, who had heard about the audacious Major engaging tanks in a Piper Cub, were present. By evening, Major General John Wood, the commander of the 4th Armored Division, arrived at the airstrip. He was eager to personally inspect the bazooka-equipped Grasshopper and meet the pilot credited with saving 40 men and halting a German counterattack. These stories take weeks to research and produce, and we share them so that the sacrifices of men like this aren't forgotten. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe and leave your opinion in the comments. We read everyone, and it truly helps us continue this work. General Wood posed a single question. "Can other pilots replicate this?" Carpenter replied, "Yes, if they are prepared to fly low and endure enemy fire." Within a week, 3 more L-4 pilots had bazookas mounted on their aircraft: Lieutenant Ralph Whittle, Captain James Parker, and Lieutenant George Wilson. While none achieved Carpenter's success rate, they validated the concept. A reconnaissance aircraft valued at $20,000 could inflict damage on tanks costing $200,000. On September 25, 1944, the German High Command issued new directives. All American liaison aircraft were now designated priority targets. Cubs equipped with weapons mounted on their wing struts were to be shot down on sight. The unwritten gentleman's agreement was officially terminated, and Carpenter had inadvertently placed a target on every L4 Grasshopper operating in France. On October 3, 1944, near Metz, a German flak gunner observed an American L4 Grasshopper approaching at 800 feet. It appeared to be a standard, harmless observation plane. The gunner tracked it through his sights, but held his fire, knowing that revealing his position would instantly draw Allied artillery fire upon him. Then, he noticed the tubes beneath the wings. The gunner opened fire, unleashing 20mm shells that tore through the air. The Grasshopper banked sharply, narrowly evading the barrage. Nevertheless, the message had been conveyed. By that evening, the Luftwaffe intelligence office at Nancy received a report indicating that American liaison aircraft were now armed and should be considered hostile. German tank commanders began receiving updated standing orders. Engage American observation aircraft immediately, utilizing machine guns and, if necessary, main guns. The directive was clear: do not permit them to approach. Carpenter observed the shift in enemy tactics immediately. Prior to October, German troops had largely ignored his Grasshopper. Now, as soon as his aircraft was sighted, every available machine gun opened fire. Flak batteries that had previously remained in position now tracked his movements across the sky. Panzer commanders, instead of focusing on ground targets, began rotating their turrets towards him. On October 5th, a Panther fired its main gun at Carpenter from a range of 900 yards. The shell missed by approximately 30 feet. However, the Germans were adapting, having deduced that a 75mm high-explosive shell did not require a direct hit to destroy a fabric-covered aircraft. The blast wave alone was sufficient. Carpenter adjusted his tactics accordingly. He began flying at much lower altitudes, often 50 feet above the ground, utilizing tree lines for cover and approaching targets from unexpected vectors. The Germans anticipated attacks from above. Carpenter began employing flanking maneuvers, approaching from the sides or from behind ridges. On one occasion, he flew down a river valley, emerging behind a German supply depot before any enemy forces could detect his presence. He also upgraded his armament. The M1 bazooka had been effective against lighter armor, but German tanks were becoming increasingly heavily armored. The new Panther ASVC-G featured improved turret armor, and the Tiger II, now arriving at the front, possessed armor that the M1 rocket could not penetrate. Morrison devised a solution: the M9 bazooka, an improved version. It weighed the same as the M1, but fired the M6A3 heat rocket, capable of penetrating 3.9 inches of armor at a 30-degree angle. More significantly, it was considerably more reliable. The M1's electrical firing system had a failure rate of 15%, whereas the M9 rarely malfunctioned. Carpenter's ground crew removed his 6 M1 launchers and installed 6 M9s. The new rockets were slightly heavier, necessitating that Morrison recalculate the weight distribution and add ballast to the tail to maintain the aircraft's balance. The modification took 6 hours to complete. By October 10th, Rosie the Riveter was once again operational. On that day, Carpenter destroyed 3 German trucks. The following day, he disabled an armored car. On October 13th, he encountered a Panther with its hatches open, its crew standing outside smoking. They did not hear the Grasshopper until it was 200 yards away. Carpenter fired from 100 feet. The rocket struck the engine deck, and the tank erupted in flames. This confirmed kill brought his official tank destruction count to 4. Unofficially, crew chiefs and ground observers claimed he had hit at least 8, some damaged but still mobile, others abandoned by their crews. The Germans began referring to him as der Ruchte Major, the Mad Major. Radio intercepts captured warnings. When Panzer commanders spotted an L4 equipped with underwing weaponry, they broadcast alerts to nearby units, describing it as the small plane with rockets. The directive was clear. Avoid if possible. Shoot down if not. Carpenter remarked to the Stars and Stripes reporter that the word must be spreading. Every time I show up now, they shoot with everything they have. They never used to bother Cubs. Bazookas must be bothering them a bit. Then, on October 18th, 4th Armored Division Intelligence received reports of a significant German buildup near Araort, comprising approximately 40 to 50 tanks. The Wehrmacht was preparing a counteroffensive to recapture Nancy, and Carpenter found himself positioned to be directly in its path. On October 19th, 1944, at 5:30 hours, the 4th Armored Division received orders to advance on Château Salins. Intelligence indicated German armor concentrating along the southeastern river, a force of 43 Panther tanks, 17 Tiger IIs, and dozens of armored cars and half-tracks, the largest German formation Patton's Third Army had encountered in 6 weeks. General Wood summoned Carpenter to division headquarters at 6:15. "I need to know what's waiting for us out there," Wood stated. "Roads, bridges, tank positions." Wood paused. "And if you see targets of opportunity?" Carpenter understood. He was being dispatched not merely for observation, but for offensive action. At 700 hours, Carpenter lifted off, followed by 2 other bazooka-equipped grasshoppers, Lieutenant Ralph Whittle flying 300 yards to his left, and Captain James Parker 300 yards beyond that. 3 Cubs, carrying a total of 18 rockets, faced an enemy force of 60 German armored vehicles. They located the enemy at 7:40 hours. German tanks were entrenched in defensive positions along a ridgeline 2 miles east of Château Salins. These were static positions, with only their turrets visible, representing ideal defensive terrain. A frontal assault by American ground forces would be suicidal. However, the Germans had made a critical oversight. Their tanks were positioned facing west, anticipating the arrival of American ground troops, and were not observing the sky. Carpenter circled to the north, approaching from the east with the morning sun behind him. The Germans did not detect him until he was 400 feet directly above their position. He fired all 6 rockets in 15 seconds. 3 found their mark, 2 Panthers and 1 Tiger II. The rockets penetrated the thin top armor. 1 Panther immediately caught fire. The Tiger's engine was disabled. The 3rd tank's turret traverse mechanism jammed. Whittle and Parker followed Carpenter's dive, unleashing their 18 rockets. A total of 12 hits were recorded between the 3 aircraft. By the time they ascended, 7 German tanks were either burning or immobilized, and an additional 4 had sustained damage. The German formation broke its defensive positions and began withdrawing eastward towards Morange. This intelligence was precisely what General Wood required. The enemy's defensive perimeter had already collapsed, long before American ground troops even engaged. Pilot Carpenter touched down at 8:30 in the morning, swiftly rearmed, and was airborne again by 9 o'clock. His second mission led him to a German logistical convoy, specifically 14 trucks laden with vital fuel and ammunition, destined for the armored forces stationed at Château Salins. Carpenter managed to incapacitate 4 of these trucks, triggering a cascading series of explosions that obliterated the entire column, including 200,000 gallons of precious fuel. His third sortie commenced at 11:30, targeting a mobile German artillery unit that was bombarding American positions near Weissers. Spotting the self-propelled cannons from a distance of 2 miles, Carpenter approached from the north and successfully destroyed 2 of these formidable vehicles. The remaining artillery pieces dispersed into the dense forest. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Carpenter had completed 6 combat flights, expending 36 rockets. The official tally credited him with the destruction of 4 enemy tanks and damage to 2 more, the elimination of 6 armored vehicles, the destruction of 4 artillery pieces, and the complete annihilation of a supply convoy. The 4th Armored Division subsequently secured Château Salins that same afternoon, with remarkably few casualties. The German defensive line had fractured not due to overwhelming American artillery barrages, but because a history instructor from Illinois, piloting a fabric-covered aircraft, repeatedly swooped from the heavens to decimate their armored might. That evening, a colonel from 3rd Army Headquarters arrived at Carpenter's temporary airfield, bearing dispatches personally signed by General Patton himself. The High Command wished to discuss the potential expansion of the bazooka program, specifically requesting Carpenter's expertise in training other pilots. Their aim was to transform his solo initiative into a standardized operational procedure for all liaison aircraft operating within the European theater. Unbeknownst to him, Carpenter had fundamentally altered the nature of American warfare. The media, however, discovered Carpenter before the Army brass did. On October 2nd, Wes Gallagher of the Associated Press published the inaugural report, detailing how a major was engaging Nazi tanks in a modified Piper Cub armed with bazookas. This story was subsequently picked up by the New York Sun, then Liberty Magazine, and Popular Science. By the middle of October, newspapers across the United States were featuring articles about the Illinois history teacher who was single-handedly confronting German tanks in his humble Piper Cub. The Pentagon found itself in a peculiar predicament. Technically, Carpenter's modification was entirely unauthorized. No existing regulation sanctioned the mounting of bazookas onto liaison aircraft. No field manual outlined such tactics, and no training program existed for this purpose. Carpenter had, in essence, pioneered an entirely new form of combat without seeking prior approval. Nevertheless, the undeniable success of his actions could not be overlooked. By October 30th, records from the 4th Armored Division attributed the destruction or disabling of 14 German tanks, 27 armored vehicles, 18 supply trucks, and 3 artillery positions to bazooka-equipped L4s, all achieved with 0 American aircraft losses. The cost-benefit analysis was nothing short of astonishing. An L4 Grasshopper cost $20,000, with the bazookas and modifications adding approximately $2,000 more. In stark contrast, a single German Panther tank commanded a price of $250,000, and a Tiger II cost twice that amount. Carpenter's humble aircraft had accounted for more enemy armor than entire Sherman tank companies. 3rd Army Headquarters issued Technical Bulletin 44-3 on November 6th, titled Employment of Bazookas on L4T type aircraft. This document meticulously detailed the mounting procedures, firing techniques, and tactical doctrine that Carpenter and his associate Morrison had painstakingly developed through trial and error. What had once been an informal experiment was now official Army policy. Approval was subsequently granted for 9 additional L4 squadrons to be equipped with bazookas. Not every pilot felt compelled to undertake such missions. Engaging German machine gun fire in an unarmored aircraft demanded a unique blend of courage and perhaps a touch of recklessness, with the line between the two often blurred. However, a sufficient number of pilots stepped forward, volunteering for the dangerous assignments. By December, 47 bazooka-equipped Grasshoppers were actively operating across France. These units formed what 3rd Army designated as tactical harassment units. While not powerful enough to substitute for dedicated fighter bombers, they proved exceptionally effective in striking targets of opportunity, including supply convoys, artillery emplacements, and tanks that strayed from their formations. The Germans, in turn, adapted their defenses, mounting additional machine guns on their tanks, specifically to counter aircraft and positioning anti-aircraft batteries along likely approach routes. Some panzer units even assigned a dedicated anti-aircraft tank within each platoon. Despite these countermeasures, the Cubs remained formidable. Their small size, exceptional maneuverability, and unpredictable tactics proved challenging for German gunners. Those trained to track fast-moving thunderbolts at 300 miles per hour struggled to adjust their aim to targets moving at a mere 85 miles per hour. By the time they acquired a grasshopper in their sights, it had already fired and disappeared behind the terrain. On December 14th, Major General Wood formally recommended Carpenter for the Silver Star, citing his gallantry in action against the enemy. Wood appended a personal note, stating, "This officer's innovative tactics saved American lives and demonstrated exceptional courage under fire." Carpenter received the medal on January 3, 1945. By this time, his official tally had risen to 6 German tanks destroyed, including 2 Tigers and 4 Panthers, establishing him as America's sole airborne tank ace. Eyewitness accounts, however, suggested the actual number was considerably higher, possibly 14 tanks or even more. Battle damage assessment proved difficult when attacking from 800 feet and maneuvering through intense machine gun fire. Yet, Carpenter himself never placed much emphasis on the count. His primary concern was for the American soldiers who returned home safely, knowing that a German tank had not been present to threaten their lives. In March of 1945, Carpenter began experiencing ill health, manifesting as exhaustion, night sweats, and significant weight loss. The flight surgeon ordered him back to a field hospital, where 3 weeks later, he received a life-altering diagnosis: Hodgkin's disease, a cancer of the lymphatic system. The doctors at the field hospital gave Carpenter an estimated 2 years to live, perhaps even less, as the disease was highly aggressive. Treatment options in 1945 were severely limited, primarily consisting of radiation therapy and experimental drugs, none of which offered favorable prognoses. Carpenter received an honorable discharge in April 1946. The Army promoted him to lieutenant colonel, presented him with his medals, and sent him back to his home in Illinois. He walked back into Urbana High School in September 1946 and requested his former teaching position. The principal, taken aback, expressed surprise, stating, "You're supposed to be dying." Carpenter responded that he would rather face his end while teaching than spend his remaining time waiting at home. He dedicated the next 20 years to teaching American history, rarely discussing his wartime experiences. When students inquired about the Silver Star displayed on his classroom wall, he would skillfully steer the conversation toward the Constitution, the Civil War, or any subject other than himself. His daughter, Carol, later remarked that he believed other individuals deserved recognition more than he did, particularly the tank crews who fought on the ground and the infantry who bravely captured enemy strongholds. He saw himself merely as an observer who happened to be equipped with rockets. However, the pilots who flew with him remembered him vividly. Upon Carpenter's passing on March 22, 1966, 47 former Army aviators attended his funeral. These were men who had flown Cubs armed with bazookas in France, Germany, and Italy. Each and every one of them credited Carpenter with demonstrating that such daring feats were indeed possible. His L-4 Grasshopper survived the war, having been left in Europe as surplus by the Army. An Austrian pilot acquired it, repainted it yellow, and flew it for many years, never realizing its remarkable history. It was eventually donated to a museum in Graz, where it remained forgotten in storage. In 2017, researchers at the American Heritage Museum identified the aircraft, bearing the serial number 43-30426, known as Rosie the Rocketer. They meticulously traced its history, verified its records, and brought it back to the United States. The restoration process spanned 3 years. During this period, meticulous work revealed layers of paint, bullet holes in the wings patched with fabric, and the original mounting brackets where Morrison had welded the bazooka tubes. Every scar on the aircraft told a part of its extraordinary story. Today, Rosie the Rocketer is proudly displayed at the American Heritage Museum in Hudson, Massachusetts, suspended in mid-action behind a replica German Panther tank, its 6 replica bazooka tubes mounted on the wing struts. Visitors can stand beneath it, gaze up at the fabric-covered wings and attempt to imagine the experience of flying such a craft into combat. The museum's informational plaque lists the factual details: 6 tanks destroyed, 47 combat sorties, 0 times shot down. America's only airborne tank ace. However, these numbers fail to fully capture the essence of Carpenter's true accomplishment. He witnessed American soldiers facing death and identified a critical problem that no one else had resolved. Instead of accepting the status quo, he procured bazookas and, with an unwavering can-do spirit, devised a solution that revolutionized modern warfare. The United States Army's current doctrine for attack helicopters directly traces its lineage back to Carpenter's innovative tactics, encompassing low-altitude strikes, standoff weaponry, and hit-and-run engagements. Every Apache pilot flying today owes a debt of gratitude to a history teacher who refused to accept that observation planes were destined to be defenseless. If this narrative has resonated with you, as it has with us, please do us a favor. Click the like button. Each and every like signals to YouTube to share this story with a wider audience. Please subscribe and enable notifications. We are dedicated to unearthing forgotten stories from dusty archives on a daily basis. These are stories about pilots, teachers, and mechanics who, through their courage and a few bazookas, saved countless lives. Leave a comment right now and let us know where you are watching from. Are you tuning in from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, or Australia? Our community spans the entire globe. You are more than just a viewer. You are an integral part of keeping these memories alive. Please share your location and inform us if any family members served. Simply let us know you are here. Thank you for watching and for ensuring that Charles Carpenter does not fade into silence. These brave individuals deserve to be remembered. If this story moved you, take a moment to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. It really helps the channel grow and lets us keep bringing you more untold history. Because remembering these men depends on people like you.